South Africa is a diverse country with multiple cultures. A lot has changed since the 90s, from the release of Nelson Mandela in the 1990 to obtaining political freedom in 1994. In order to celebrate the freedom we have today, we have to honor those who sacrificed their lives for us to be where we are today. On this video, we're going to be looking at 10 freedom fighters that were assassinated by the Apartheid government that they don't teach about, in no particular order. Vernon Nkadimeng was born 25 June 1958 in Alexandria and was the member of the African National Congress. He fled South Africa in 1976 following the Soweto uprising, known as Youth Day, June 16. At the age of 18, he entered Umkhonto Wesizwe in Angola, the armed wing of the ANC, and soon rose up through the military structure of the MK. He traveled to Slovakia with the MK, where he received special military training. On the 21st of May 1985, Nkadimeng was killed by a car bomb placed by the Apartheid police. Unfortunately, this is the only image captured of Vernon Nkadimeng, and there's not much information available about him.
After the hanging of Benjamin Moloise, it was when we now sivulega mehlo.
Malasela Benjamin Moloise was born in 1955 in Alexandria. He was a factory worker, poet, and the follower of the then forbidden ANC. He was executed by the Apartheid government in October 1985 at Pretoria Central Prison for his supposed role in the 1982 murder of a security policeman. However, the African National Congress claimed responsibility for the murder and dismissed the claims that Benjamin Moloise was involved. The United States and the Soviet Union warned the Apartheid government against the execution, but the government still decided to go ahead with it. The execution of Benjamin Moloise aroused anger in the townships, which escalated in violence. This spiraled out of control and reached areas like Johannesburg CBD. Before his execution, he famously penned the following lines: "I am proud to be what I am. The storm of oppression will be followed by the rain of my blood. I am proud to give my life, my one solitary life." Ruth First was born 14 May 1925 in Johannesburg. She was a South African anti-apartheid activist and a scholar. She was assassinated in Mozambique, where she was working in exile, by a parcel bomb built by the South African police at that time. Ruth First's parents emigrated to South Africa in the early 1906 and became founding members of the Communist Party of South Africa, the CPSA. Like her parents, she joined the Communist Party, which aligned with the African National Congress in its structure to overthrow the South African government at that time. Having grown in a political conscious home, she took part in a lot of strikes, like the 1946 mine workers' strike and the Indian passive resistance, and many campaigns surrounding the outlawing of communism in 1950. In 1949, she married Joe Slovo, a lawyer and a labor organizer, and like her, a communist. Through the 1950s, their home in Roosevelt Park was an important center for multiracial political gatherings. In 1953, Ruth First helped found the South African Congress Democrats, the COD, the white wing of the Congress Alliance. She was on the drafting committee of the Freedom Charter, but was unable to attend the Congress of the People in Clifton in 1955 because of a banning order. In March 1964, Ruth First went into exile in London, where she became active in the British anti-apartheid movement. In 1978, she took up the post of Director of Research at the Center of African Studies in Maputo, Mozambique. She was assassinated on the 17th of August 1982 when she opened a parcel bomb that had been sent to the university. An anthropologist working with Ruth First was in the same office when she was murdered and testified to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the TRC. Mxenge Gqabi was born 6 April 1929 in Alwal North, Eastern Cape. He was an African National Congress activist and was the ANC chief representative in Zimbabwe at the time of his assassination by the South African Apartheid Defence Force in Harare. Mxenge Gqabi went to Johannesburg in 1951 and joined the ANC in 1952, and later the Underground Communist Party. At the time, he was working as a photographer and a reporter in a newspaper called New Age, where he used his job to expose the hidden crimes of apartheid. In 1961, he went to exile to join the newly formed military wing of the ANC, Umkhonto Wesizwe. He was later captured in Southern Rhodesia, now known as Zimbabwe, and sentenced to 2 years imprisonment for leaving the country illegally. Upon completing his prison term, he was rearrested and charged under the Sabotage Act. He was convicted and sentenced to 10 years imprisonment on Robben Island, where he served his sentence together with prominent ANC political leaders such as Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, Govan Mbeki, and the others. In early 1963, he was rearrested in Northern Rhodesia in the company of group of MK recruits and deported to South Africa. Following his release, Gqabi was served with a restriction order. However, this did not deter him from political activities. As the 1976 student uprising was approaching, he guided and advised students and the youth. Gqabi became chief defendant in the 1977 Pretoria 12 trial. Mxenge Gqabi was gunned down by the members of the Apartheid Hit Squad on the 31st of July 1981. He was shot 19 times while reversing down the driveway of his house in Harare, Zimbabwe. He was given a state funeral by the Zimbabwean government. His killer was apprehended by the ANC but never charged. His body was exhumed in 2004 and brought to South Africa for a reburial in his hometown of Alwal North in the Eastern Cape. Tuli Shezi was born 1947 and was the Student Representative Council at the University of Zululand and later became the Vice President at the Black People's Convention, the forerunner of the Azanian People Organization, AZAPO. Tuli Shezi was a leading Black consciousness movement intellectual, political leader, and a cultural activist. He was also the playwright of a note. Shezi's famous play, The Shanti, which had famous words like, "I am black, black like my mother, black like the Sahara, black like the continent," was performed to rave reviewers by the People's Experimental Theatre Group in the early 1970s. Throughout his writing of his plays, Shezi was introducing scores of South Africans to Black consciousness ideas and influenced a generation of leaders and activists. In 1972, Tuli Shezi was brutally killed after being pushed in front of a moving train at Germiston railway station when he came to defense of African women who were being drenched with water from a hosepipe by a white station cleaner. Tuli Shezi, as a Black consciousness adherent, did not waver to defend Black people because Black consciousness at heart is Black agency. Abraham Tiro was born 9 November 1945 and was a student, activist, and Black consciousness militant. He was born in Dinokana, a small village near Zerast. He was expelled from the University of the North, known as University of Limpopo, in 1972 for his political activities. At the university, he had become an active member of the South African Student Organization, out of which grew Black consciousness movements. After his expulsion from the University of the North, following his critique on the Bantu Education Act of 1953, he went on to teach history at Morris Isaacson High School near and around Central West Gqabi in Soweto in 1973. Tsietsi Mishinini, who was an integral part of the 1976 student uprising, was one of the students during the time that he taught at Morris Isaacson, and many of his students have recalled his impact on their own politicization during this period of student organization in the South African history. Tiro was killed by a parcel bomb in Botswana in 1974. Victoria Nonyamezelo Mxenge was born in 1942 in Tamara Village in King Williamstown, Eastern Cape in 1959. She matriculated in Hilton, Fort Beaufort. She qualified as a nurse at Victoria Hospital in 1964 and moved to Natal after marrying Ruth Mxenge. She completed a midwifery course at King Edward Hospital and worked as a nurse in the community of Umlazi. She then went to study law through UNISA. After the death of her husband, she carried out with the law practice. She often intervened to protect youth ill-treatment in detention. She was part of the defense team in the 1984 treason trial against leaders of the United Democratic Front and the Natal Indian Congress in the Pietermaritzburg Supreme Court. Mama Mxenge started a bursary fund in memory of her late husband, Ruth Mxenge. She became member of the Release Nelson Mandela Committee and the National Organization of Women and the Natal Treasurer of the UDF. In July 1985, she was invited to speak at the funeral of Matthew Goniwe, Fort Tsalata, Sparrow Mkhondo, and Sicelo Mhlawuli, the Craddock Four, attended by approximately 50,000 mourners. Within days of the funeral speech, on the 1st of August 1985, 4 men attacked Mama Mxenge in the driveway of her home in Umlazi, Durban, and murdered her in front of her children. She was laid to rest next to her husband at Rai Cemetery in the presence of 10,000 mourners. In 1987, the magistrate court refused a formal inquest hearing but urged that she had died from head injuries and had been murdered by persons unknown. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission (TRC) report on the assassination of Mama Victoria Mxenge's documents that her killers were allegedly recruited by the security branch of the then government. In 2006, Victoria Mxenge was awarded the National Order of the Order of Luthuli in silver for her excellent contribution in the field of law and sacrifices made in the fight against apartheid oppression in South Africa. Mapetla Mohapi was born on the 2nd of September 1947, Sterkspruit. He matriculated in Bensonville High School, studied in the University of North in Tafelberg, where he graduated with a degree in social work in the early 70s. Mapetla was granted scholarship to continue his degree at the University of Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States. He was twice refused a passport and was unable to travel. He joined the South African Students Organization and the Black Consciousness Movement. He took up the position of the Regional Secretary of SASO and later elected Permanent Secretary of SASO. They held a rally in October 1974 to celebrate the independence of Mozambique. Mapetla Mohapi, together with the leaders of SASO and the Black People's Convention, were detained. He was released in April 1975 after spending 164 days without having been charged. Mapetla was banned in 1975 under the Suppression of Communism Act and confined to the areas of King Williamstown and Zwelitsha. a month after the start of the 1976 Soweto uprising. In a swap of black consciousness activities, Mapetla was again detained without charge on June 16, 1976. According to Mapetla Mohapi, who is the wife of Mapetla Mohapi, Mapetla was taken into custody at about 3:30 p.m. and was taken into King Williamstown Police Station and then to Kai Road Police Station, where he was detained under Section 6 of the Terrorism Act. 22 days after his arrest, Mapetla died in police custody at Kai Road Police Station on August 5, 1976. After his death, police produced a suicide note, claiming he had committed suicide in his cell. The note was then confirmed by a leading British handwriting expert as forgery, but found that nobody could be held responsible for Mapetla's death. Vusumzi Mini was born April 1920 in Tsomo, Transkei, in the Eastern Cape. He was a unionist, Umkhondo Wesizwe activist, a singer, and one of the first African National Congress members to be executed by the Apartheid Government of South Africa. Vusumzi Mini was at the forefront in the fight against minority rule and discrimination. On an interview, Umamunoma India Mxenge spoke sadly about her last interactions with her brother Vusumzi Mini. He said to me, "You should notice this. I have bought a plot for burial. One is for me and the other for my comrades. You should make sure that nobody is going to be buried on top of the other. Because when people get hanged, they usually get dumped in one grave." Vusumzi Mini was allegedly arrested for treason in 1963 and was executed on the 6th of November 1964 at the Pretoria Central Prison, together with Wilson Kanyingo and Zenakele Mkhaba. Even though Vusumzi Mini arranged everything and even bought the plots, the government buried him in a pauper's grave, then reburied in a memorial site in Port Elizabeth at New Brighton in 1998. His remains were then later moved to his hometown, Mhlahlane, a village in Tsomo, and was given a provincial official reburial in 2001. The Pepco Three. After an increase in the cost of living for the black population in Port Elizabeth, following a 100% rent fee price hike in the late 1970s, the residents of Port Elizabeth decided to organize themselves and form an organization that will challenge social economic injustices that were meted out on black people, including the apartheid regime. On the 10th of October 1979, after having officially established the Port Elizabeth Black Civic Organization, Pepco, a public meeting was held where it was decided that a protest against the increase in rent, transport, fuel and lighting, township services, charges and food costs be held. Pepco's immediate aims and demands were to fight for equal rights for all people of Port Elizabeth, to fight all discriminatory legislation enacted by the government and local authorities, to seek participation in decision-making on all matters affecting the people of South Africa, to fight for the granting of the right to blacks to buy land at any place of their choice. Their fundamental aim included the creation of one municipality for the whole of Port Elizabeth, therefore rejecting the system of community councils and separate municipalities for black and whites. The leaders of Pepco were Twasile Champion Galela, who was born in Costin, Port Elizabeth on October 24, 1947, and was the organizing secretary of Pepco. Sipho Hashe, who was born in Middledrift, Ngqambase village in the Eastern Cape in 1934. He was a member of the African National Congress and a Robben Island prisoner. He was the Secretary General of Pepco. Kakawule Kotolozi. He was born in Durban on the 26th of July 1955, and became the president of Pepco in 1980. He, together with Sipho Hashe and Champion Kalela, played a prominent role in organizing and coordinating resistance activities, such as consumer and bus boycotts, stayaways, and protests and marches. The Pepco Three were kidnapped and sent to a farmhouse near Cradock, where they were tortured till death and their bodies were burned. This is just 10 out of many people who sacrificed their lives in order to obtain this freedom we have today. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.